The most incredible science fiction story unfolds in a universe where Jane, a brilliant scientist, discovers a way to travel to parallel worlds, different versions of Earth that are unlike anything we've ever imagined. Some of these Earths are unrecognizable, where humans never even existed, while others are eerily similar, yet carry dark fates. Now the question looms, can Jane survive in these strange worlds and find her way back to the real Earth? The story begins with Jane sneaking into a house late at night, but as she cautiously steps inside, she realizes something shocking. A version of herself is already there. Startled and confused, Jane quickly flees, leading us into a flashback from 3 weeks earlier. In this flashback, we learn that scientists have recently made an astounding discovery. Our universe is far bigger than they ever thought. They've confirmed the existence of parallel universes, each with its own version of Earth. Some of these Earths are teeming with life, just like ours, while others are barren, devoid of life, or destroyed by nuclear wars. While the scientific community knows these parallel worlds exist, the mystery of how to travel to them remains unsolved until now. We're introduced to Jane, a dedicated scientist who lives with her husband Matt and their 2 children, Jack and Samantha. They are a small, happy family living their normal lives. After breakfast one morning, Jane heads to her lab where she's working on a secret project with her assistant Reg. The 2 of them are building a machine that could connect different universes, a breakthrough that could change everything. They've created a teleportation device with 2 chambers. The first chamber is where they place objects, and the second is where those objects are supposed to appear, teleported from one chamber to the other. Before testing on anything valuable, Jane and Reg decided to experiment with an apple. They placed it inside the teleportation chamber and turned on the machine. The device scanned the apple without issue, but just as the teleportation process was about to begin, a massive blackout struck. The entire building's lights went out. When the power returned, the apple was still in the same spot, unmoved. Jane realized the machine needed far more energy to work. The experiment had failed. Frustrated, Jane took a break and met her husband Matt by the lake, a quiet place where they often spent time alone. She poured out her worries to him, explaining how the investors were pressuring her to finish the experiment quickly. Matt listened patiently and, with unwavering confidence, assured her that he believed in her. He knew she would succeed soon. In the following days, Jane and Reg repeated the experiment several times, but every attempt ended in failure. The only thing that kept Jane grounded was Matt's support. He always made her feel better after talking, and even after all these years of marriage, they loved each other deeply. It was during one of these moments that Jane got a new idea, boosting the machine's energy input. The thought struck her while watching a video on a similar topic. Excited by this idea, Jane went to the lab the very next day, fully prepared to try again. She had adjusted the energy levels, and this time, when they powered on the machine, there was a massive surge of energy. The apple vanished from the chamber in a flash. Jane and Reg were thrilled. They had finally achieved teleportation, but their excitement was short-lived. The apple had disappeared from its original chamber, but it hadn't appeared in the receiving one. Both of them were puzzled. Where had the apple gone? Though the mystery of its destination remained, they couldn't help but feel a sense of accomplishment. They had successfully moved something, and soon they would discover where the apple had teleported. Jane had just made a major breakthrough and was eager to share the news with her husband, Matt. She headed to the lake where they often met, but something felt off. Matt hadn't shown up yet, which was unusual. He had never been late before. Her worry deepened when her phone rang, and Matt's name flashed on the screen. When she answered, she heard his voice, weak and shaky. He sounded hurt, and in a trembling tone, he told her he wasn't sure if he would make it. He asked her to take care of their children, as if he knew this might be their last conversation. Panicked, Jane rushed to the highway, only to find a terrible scene. Matt had been in a horrific accident, and it was clear that he hadn't survived. The loss hit her like a wave, leaving her shattered. For the next few days, Jane was completely devastated. She drank constantly, barely able to cope with the pain, while her young son watched helplessly, trying to get her to stop. Both children could see how much their mother was suffering, so they came up with a plan. They invited Jane's younger sister Ruth to stay with them for a while, hoping her presence would help Jane move on from Matt's death. But Jane couldn't let go of Matt. She was determined not to forget him, no matter what. Then one day, a thought struck her. She hurriedly called her assistant, Reg, and told him something important. After reviewing the data from one of her earlier experiments, she realized that the apple she had teleported hadn't appeared in her receiving chamber as it should have. But Jane had a theory. She believed the apple hadn't disappeared, but had instead materialized in a parallel universe, in a receiving chamber just like theirs, but in another world. Excited, Jane rushed to the lab, where she explained her idea to Reg. They had accidentally stumbled upon the discovery of a parallel world. The apple must have arrived in another universe, where another version of Jane and Reg could be conducting conducting the same experiment. Now all they had to do was find a way to make contact with that other world. Jane had a theory. Maybe the versions of themselves in that other universe hadn't yet figured out how to get their machine running. So Jane and Reg came up with a plan. They would write down the formula for increasing the machine's energy and teleport it over, hoping it would reach the other side. They did just that, sending a note through the machine. Like before, the note disappeared. Jane suggested they wait to see if they get any kind of response, to prove if another parallel world really existed. 2 days later, Jane's belief was confirmed. Reg called her, telling her to come to the lab immediately. When she arrived, they discovered a new note in the receiving chamber. It simply said, "Thank you." Jane and Reg were thrilled. Soon after, the apple they had sent earlier came back, but with a bite taken out of it. This was solid proof. Their theory was correct, and they had successfully teleported objects to a parallel world. But now, a bigger question loomed over them. How many parallel worlds actually existed? Were there just 2, or could there be 3, thousands, or even millions? They realized they needed more evidence. To find out, they teleported an empty camera this time. Not long after, the camera returned. But this time, it wasn't empty. It had a recording on it. Jane and Reg played the video, and to their astonishment, they saw another version of Jane. She greeted them with a hello and showed them her lab, where she was conducting the same experiment alongside her own version of Reg. The Jane on the screen looked a little different, and so did the lab and the machine. Clearly, this parallel universe wasn't exactly the same as theirs. Jane and Reg were amazed. They had finally discovered another universe. In all of human history, this was one of the greatest discoveries ever made, and they were overjoyed. After the success, Jane went to the lake where she and Matt often met. As she stood there, a thought struck her. What if in that other universe, Matt had never died? A small spark of hope ignited inside her. Without wasting time, Jane rushed back to the lab. Reg wasn't there, but Jane didn't hesitate. She stepped into the chamber and, without thinking twice, teleported herself to the parallel world where she believed Matt might still be alive. Jane had successfully reached the second universe. From now on, this universe would be called Universe 2, and its versions of people would be referred to as Number 2. Since Jane came from Universe 1, she would simply be called by her name. The lab in Universe 2 was a bit different from hers. Everything had a red hue instead of the familiar colors she was used to. She quickly left the lab and noticed the world around her. This version of Earth was far more advanced, with futuristic drones flying overhead. It was a stark contrast to the Earth she knew. But Jane wasn't here for the technology. She had only one thing on her mind: Matt. She rushed to the lake where she and her Matt used to meet. To her surprise, Matt was standing there, just like she hoped. Without thinking, she ran toward him, but Matt looked shocked, almost terrified, as if he had seen a ghost. With a trembling voice, he said, "You died this morning." Jane quickly explained that she wasn't the Jane from this universe. She had come from a parallel world. She told him everything, how her Matt had died in a tragic accident and how she and their children had missed him deeply. But Matt was still in shock. He quietly responded, "In this universe, we never had children." Jane suddenly realized that things in this world were very different from what she had known. In her universe, Matt had died, but in this one, it was Jane who had been killed in the same accident, and here there were no children at all. Understanding the differences, Jane made a heartfelt plea to Matt. She asked him to come back with her to her universe, explaining that there were no children in this world and that his Jane had already died. Matt, seeing the situation from her perspective, agreed to go with her. Together, they hurried back to the lab, where they teleported themselves back to Jane's original Earth, Universe 1. When Jane and Matt too arrived back at the lab, Reg was furious. He immediately confronted Jane, warning her that bringing someone from a parallel world was reckless and dangerous. They had barely scratched the surface of how the space-time continuum worked, and Jane was risking the collapse of the entire universe just to satisfy her own desires. Jane, however, defended her decision. She reminded Reg that she had created the teleportation machine, and with time, she would figure out the rules governing the parallel worlds. Amidst this heated conversation, something strange happened. Matt too began staring at Reg with an odd intensity, as if he recognized him or knew something about him that neither Jane nor Reg were aware of. The reason behind Matt 2's strange behavior would soon be revealed. Jane took Matt 2 home to introduce him to her children, Jack and Samantha. The kids were overjoyed, believing their father had returned from the dead. For them, it was like a miracle. But for Matt 2, the situation was deeply unsettling. He had no children in his universe, and seeing the kids call him dad was surreal. The challenges didn't end there. In this world, the real Matt was known to be dead, so they couldn't simply explain Matt 2's presence presence to others. Jane and Matt too decided that he would need to stay hidden for a few days until they figured out what to do. Despite everything, Jane was overjoyed to have a version of her husband back in her life. They spent their days together, exchanging stories about their respective worlds. Jane learned that Matt too's Earth was vastly different, far more advanced technologically, but also scarred by violence. Matt too even carried a weapon for self-defense, something that shocked Jane. He explained that in his world, everyone carried weapons because danger was a constant reality. He also admitted that his Earth had become ugly due to the overuse of technology, making Jane's Earth seem beautiful in comparison. The next morning, as Matt too was taking a walk, one of Jane's neighbors approached him. The neighbor was startled, immediately recognizing him and blurting out, "How are you alive? You were supposed to be dead. What, are you faking your death for insurance money?" Matt too tried to walk away, but the neighbor blocked his path, demanding a bribe to keep quiet. He threatened to tell everyone that Matt was still alive unless he was paid off. At that moment, something snapped inside Matt too. In a fit of rage, he pulled out his futuristic weapon and, without thinking, killed the man. The situation had taken a dark and unexpected turn, leaving Jane both shocked and terrified. This Matt too, was nothing like the Matt she once knew. His nature, shaped by a violent world, was far more aggressive. He had mentioned to Jane before that violence was a way of life on his Earth, where people often killed each other. But now she was seeing that violence firsthand. Matt too had become increasingly unstable over the past few days. He would often stare at Jack and Samantha with unsettling intensity and became easily agitated over small things. One day, he exploded in anger at Samantha over a simple painting she had made. Jane stepped in, trying to calm him down, and reassured herself that perhaps Matt too was struggling to adjust to this new world. After all, he wasn't used to children. She decided that it would be best to send the kids to her sister Ruth's house for a few days, giving Matt too some space to adjust. Matt too agreed to this plan. Jane took the children to Ruth's, hoping that some distance would ease the tension. But while she was on her way back, her phone rang. It was Matt too. Jane told him she had dropped the kids off and was headed to the lab to meet Reg. The moment she mentioned Reg's name, something inside Matt too snapped. His voice turned cold, and he began shouting, accusing Jane of being unfaithful, calling her a lustful woman who was having an affair with Reg. Hearing this, Jane's heart sank. She realized with chilling clarity that this Matt wasn't just different, he was dangerous. The man she had brought into her world wasn't her Matt. He was a violent stranger with deep, disturbing issues. Jane rushed to the lab, her mind racing. She confided in Reg, admitting that she had made a grave mistake by bringing Matt too into their universe. She told him that she now suspected Matt too was dangerous, potentially even a killer. Jane was determined to find out the truth and said she had to return to Matt's universe to understand who this Matt really was. Without hesitation, Jane stepped back into the teleportation chamber and transported herself back to Universe 2. She went straight to the place where Matt had lived, her heart pounding with dread. What she found there was horrifying. Inside the house, she discovered the lifeless body of Jane too. Her throat tightened as the grim reality hit her. Matt too had murdered his Jane. The man she had brought into her universe was a killer. Meanwhile, back in Universe 1, Matt too had grown suspicious. He stormed into the lab, demanding to know where Jane had gone. Reg, caught off guard, told him the truth, that Jane had returned to Matt's universe to uncover the truth about him. Matt too, now completely unhinged, made his next move. First, he shattered the receiving chamber, the only way Jane could return to her own universe. Trapping her in Universe 2, he then turned his rage on Reg, killing him. Meanwhile, in Universe 2, Jane, terrified and desperate, rushed back to the lab. She tried repeatedly to teleport back to her real world, but something was wrong. No matter how hard she tried, she couldn't make the machine work. Jane was stuck in this violent and dangerous world. Just then, Reg 2, the version of Reg from this universe, arrived. He looked confused and concerned, asking Jane where she had been for the past few days. He mentioned that he had been calling her repeatedly, wondering why she hadn't answered. As he stepped closer, Jane's heart sank as she realized something crucial. In this universe, Jane too had been having an affair with Reg too. That was the reason Matt too had killed her. Suddenly, everything made sense. In Jane's universe, she had never had an affair and had loved her Matt deeply. But Matt too, coming from his own world, assumed that Jane was having the same affair with Reg in Universe 1, just as it had happened in Universe 2. That's why he had stared at Reg with suspicion and anger, and why he had killed Reg back in Jane's real world. But Jane didn't know about Reg's death yet. Determined to stop Matt too, Jane explained everything to Reg too. She convinced him to help her restart the teleportation machine so she could return to her universe and save her children from Matt too. Together, they managed to power up the machine, and both Jane and Reg too teleported out of Universe 2. But when they arrived at their destination, they quickly realized something was off. They rushed to Jane's house only to discover that a version of Jane was already there, living in the home. It became clear they weren't in Universe 1 or 2. They had accidentally teleported to a third universe, where yet another version of Jane existed. Jane, now more frustrated and scared than ever, told Reg 2 that they needed to return to the lab immediately. Once back at the lab, Jane explained everything to him, the whole truth. She revealed that Matt 2 had killed Jane 2 after finding out about their affair in Universe 2. And now Matt 2 was in Universe 1, where he was likely planning to harm her children, believing she was unfaithful. Jane was desperate to return to her world and stop him before it was too late. But this time, Reg 2 made a decision. He had seen too much violence and chaos, and despite everything, he couldn't leave this third universe. In this world, Jane was still alive, and there was a chance for him to stay with her, even if she wasn't the same Jane he had known. Jane quickly entered the new codes into the machine and teleported again, racing against time to save her children. Meanwhile, in her real universe, Matt 2 had completely lost his mind. He was on his way to Ruth's house, determined to kill Jane's children. But Jane reached Ruth's house just in time, and with a trembling voice, she explained everything to Ruth and the kids. She revealed that Matt 2 was a murderer from another universe and that he was coming to kill them. They needed to hide immediately, but it was too late. Matt 2 had already arrived. Jane confronted him, telling him she knew the truth, that he had killed Jane in his own universe. Enraged, Matt 2 prepared to use his weapon on her. Just as he was about to strike, Jane's son leaped at him, catching him off guard. Matt 2 fell unconscious, and together they tied him up. Now they were faced with a difficult decision. They couldn't go to the police because, in this universe, the real Matt was already dead. What could they possibly explain? After some discussion, they came up with a plan. They decided to teleport Matt 2 to a destroyed, uninhabitable universe, ensuring he would never return. They took him to the lab and carried out the plan. Finally, they were free from the danger Matt 2 posed. But when Matt 2 woke up, he found himself in a fourth universe, a desolate, maze-like world where no humans remained. The environment was extreme, and Matt 2 realized with horror that he was trapped. Worse than any hell he could imagine, he was stuck on this earth forever, his punishment for the terrible deeds he had committed. Meanwhile, Jane had come to terms with the fact that her real Matt was never coming back. She promised herself she would never attempt to go to another universe again. She moved on, focusing on her children and her life. 2 months passed, and Jane was starting to feel happy again. She and her children were at home when the doorbell rang. Jane went to open it, and to her surprise, Reg 2 stood on the doorstep. The same Reg 2 from the other universe, the one Jane had originally traveled to with Matt 2. Reg 2 had shocking news. He told Jane that they had made a terrible mistake. The truth was that Jane wasn't in her real universe. She had ended up in a fifth universe, one that was nearly identical to her own. He explained that in her actual universe, the receiving chamber had been destroyed by Matt 2, and without it, Jane could never have returned. This meant that back in Jane's real universe, Matt 2 had likely already killed her children. With this heartbreaking revelation, the story ends on a chilling note. The question now lingers. If you had the chance to travel to a parallel universe, would you dare to go? Let me know in the comments. And if you enjoyed this story, please give the video a like and subscribe to the channel for more mind-bending stories like this one. Thank you for watching.